Hi everyone, and welcome to our Your Basic Income session for Imagine Festival 2020. This is a slightly different session than we originally planned. So today we're going to give you an overview of Universal Basic Income, and we're going to talk a little bit about it in our current health crisis. My name is Lucy McKenna. I'm joined here as well by Patrick Brown and Julie Hoey, who are all members of Basic Income Northern Ireland. So, who or what is Basic Income Northern Ireland? We're actually an advocacy group for Universal Basic Income, and it was actually set up off the back of an event in Imagine Festival 2 years ago in 2018. So we've been running for a couple of years. And essentially, our real vision is to work towards a society that's fair and equal. And to do that, we really want to help people in Northern Ireland understand what is universal basic income, get the conversation started, and work towards actually potentially piloting something like this in Northern Ireland. So, to kick off, I'm going to just talk you through a little bit about what UBI is. We'll refer to it as UBI going forward. I'm going to share some slides and we'll talk through them. And then, as I said, Patrick and Julie will then have a conversation around UBI and in the essence of our current health crisis and how it could actually be very beneficial. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Okay, so what is a universal basic income? Well, it's essentially a stipend paid by the state to everyone in a community or every citizen. And it is from cradle to grave. So it may be slightly different levels that depending on the age that you are, but it is something that everyone is entitled to. It is unconditional. It is absolutely not means tested. It doesn't depend on your work or any work that you are doing. And it is something that would then replace potentially core welfare benefits as they exist. Okay, how it is implemented is slightly different in different places, and there have been multiple pilots happening all over the world to date. I don't know if we'll get to talk about some of that later, but maybe Patrick can reference some of those later in our session. Okay, so the thing with universal basic income is that everyone gets it. So this is something that everyone can rely on, that they will have a certain amount of money that will cover your basic needs. So this is to allow you to have a roof over your head, put food in your cupboard and clothes on your back. It's not going to be a luxurious existence, but it is a basic stipend to help you at least do that. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the benefits of universal basic income. Well, first of all, it encourages those who may be in unemployment to actually get back into the workforce. So there's no threat of this basic income being pulled if you go back to work. You will get this on top of the salary that you earn. So it allows you to go back on shorter contracts, on less hours, so there is no threat that this will disappear. It also encourages entrepreneurship. So imagine you knew that your basic needs would be covered. What might you go out and do? What business might you actually want to set up? So it really does create a bit of innovation in the community and in society. It creates a society where people can actually access education. So you can actually take time to go and upskill and to learn new things. So it really evens the playing field in that sense. It recognises, and this is a massive piece, it recognises unpaid work in our society, of which there is so much, particularly in the caring field. So those who are looking after maybe elderly parents or family members, and of course those looking after young people and children. So it absolutely recognises the work that has been done and that is currently unpaid. It supports artists or volunteers or those working in the social sector. That is really important for our society, but again, often unpaid or paid quite little. It will also, it essentially will really improve the quality of life. So imagine you didn't have to do the job that you were doing, that you could decide how you want to spend your time. So you could decide that you might just want to have this basic income and live quite a frugal existence, but then you would have time and energy to do other things. Maybe that's exploring a hobby that you have, maybe that's learning something new, maybe that's spending more time with family. So it really does go out to improve the quality of life. And essentially it will lead to a much more satisfying existence, better mental health, and a kinder world. So, you know, imagine you have the stress of, you know, where your next meal is coming from. Imagine the benefits that this could have for mental health. Okay, so these are just some of the benefits, and I'm sure Julie and Patrick, you'll probably touch on some of these things in your conversation in a little bit. Okay, so I want to just take you through a couple of examples. So what is the impact that UBI might actually have? Okay, so I want to give you a few examples of people in different situations. So the first is Sam. Sam has worked in the area of facilities managers all his life. Since he left school, he's worked hard to get there, and he's been in that job for quite some time. He's no longer engaged in that job, but it pays well, it gives him security. He has 2 kids and his partner, and that's something that he needs. They live in the city, him and his family. However, that was not always the plan, but it's the place where the best opportunities are for his work and for that of his partner. He loves music, he enjoys playing it, he loves going to gigs. He has thought of applying his facility management skills to event management potentially, or doing concerts, but this remains just an idea. So imagine we live in a world of universal basic income. What might this actually mean for Sam? Well, it might allow him to step back from the job that he has done all his life and reflect a little bit and see if it is something that he wants to do. But then it might also allow him to go out and maybe try doing event management, apply those skills to event management. It says that, you know, the plan wasn't always to live in the city. Could, on a universal basic income, could him and his partner make the decision to move to a more rural area? So that's another benefit. It can actually revive the rural areas of countries. So could they make that decision and maybe take a job that pays less, but they might be paying less rent? So that is something that they could do as well. And these are just ideas of what they could do. So the next person is Sarah. Sarah is self-employed as a graphic designer. It's a job that she really likes, but as with anyone who's self-employed, there are many ups, there are many downs. She actually provides different pricing options for profits organizations versus non-for-profit, because she wants everyone to be able to access what she does. Although she finds during tough times that she actually ends up working for more for-profit because she needs to keep herself going. She has found, you know, since becoming self-employed, and for anyone who is self-employed, you could probably relate, you don't spend as much time doing the hobbies that you really enjoyed potentially beforehand. She used to love surfing. She did it a lot previously, but right now the only time she gets into nature is walking through the park to her job. So what could a universal basic income do for Sarah? Well, it would take the stress out of navigating those downs that come with being self-employed. It may allow her to actually do more work for non-for-profits, which she enjoys and that she wants to do. And it might give her the opportunity to maybe take some time off every year where she can go and apply to her hobbies, or maybe cut down the number of days that she works every week so that she can actually reinvest in her hobbies and in herself, which of course then improves mental health and everything else that goes with that. And the last person we have is Claire, who's not currently in paid employment. So she has worked in a clothing retailer in the past, but that retailer is closed down in her smaller town. They give her the opportunity to move into the city, to a bigger city where she could continue her work. However, she has an aging mother and she made the decision to stay in the smaller town and look after her mum, to be nearby her. So she does spend a lot of time doing that. She would like to return to full-time work, but right now she wouldn't have enough money to pay carers to do that. She volunteers with her local animal shelter. She enjoys horse riding, but she doesn't really do it anymore because, you know, it's quite an expensive sport. Or in order to do it, she would need to be working. So again, if we think about what a universal basic income could do for Claire, well, you have to consider it's not just Claire that's getting the universal basic income here, also her mother is. So maybe combining the universal basic income of both, they would be able to pay for some carers for her mum, and that would allow Claire then maybe to find work in her local town, or maybe be able to be in the city a few days a week or whatever it might work for her. It also might allow her to invest in her hobby and the thing that she enjoys, and do some horse riding from time to time. But again, you know, we don't know these people, but this is just a couple of things that universal basic income could enable for people in different situations. And I would ask, and I suppose, you know, given that the crazy times that we're living through at the minute, it might be an opportunity for you to reflect, well, what would you change if you had a universal basic income, an income that basically covered your basic needs, your food, your shelter, and your clothing? How might you change what your world looks like and how you live? And that's something that maybe we do have a little bit of time to reflect on now. So why is the time now for universal basic income? So putting aside our current health crisis, which Patrick and Julie will talk about in a minute, we are living in a society where jobs are being increasingly automated. And this has been one of the reasons that universal basic income is really coming to the fore at the moment. And the second thing is that we are living in a world of extreme inequality. So there is the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. In Northern Ireland, 30% of the lower households account for about 14% of the income, whereas the top 10% account for 24% of the income in society. So, you know, that was from 2016 research done then. So even in our own society in Northern Ireland, that inequality is very clear. But what I want to do now is I want to hand off to Patrick and Julie, who are going to talk about UBI in the context of the current health crisis that we are experiencing, and how it could actually play a really big part in helping us navigate the days that are, and weeks and months that are ahead of us. Cool. So thank you, and guys, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'm just going to stop sharing here so you can have a chat.
Thanks, Lucy. That was great. Patrick, I was going to kick off this part of our discussion by asking you, why do you think UBI has become such a talking point during this health crisis?
Sure. Yes. Well, thanks, Lucy, for your contribution. That was great. So, in terms of why this has become such a big talking point, I think it's because this pandemic really, the main thing it affects is our social interaction. And we are seeing very clearly that all of society and subsequently our economy runs on social interactions. And what this virus, this pandemic is doing is stopping us from being able to fulfill those social interactions in the same way that we would ordinarily do. It necessitates reducing those social interactions that so much of our economy is built on. And if money can't be generated in the same way to fuel the economy, then we are facing, and I think we are currently rapidly moving towards, an unprecedented economic breakdown. I think there's a very interesting point to make, though, about who actually powers the economy on the day-to-day, because this isn't 2008. We're not talking about bailing out the banks anymore in this conversation. You know, no one's talking about that. We're talking about bailing out people. You know, we're talking about bailing out the people who really run and power the economy, the small business owner, the unpaid carer, the barista. I know as a coffee addict that the world would not run without baristas. This is the actual human face of the economy. And I think if there's one positive to come out of this, we are better understanding the people day to day who are keeping the economy going, and the impact that this pandemic, through limiting social interactions, is directly having on the economy. Everyone has been affected in some way by this. I think there's varying degrees of that, but because of the way it affects those social interactions, the scale of the people affected is huge. And therefore, the only way we can get around that is through some sort of universal program that reaches everyone. And I think that's why people are looking to what may have previously been understood or thought of as quite radical policies like basic income in this time of crisis, because it is by its nature universal. And yes, this crisis has completely changed the conversation around UBI, something that has been gaining traction, particularly over the last few years, with an increasing number of trials happening worldwide. But it has brought that to the forefront of public discourse in an incredibly urgent way. And it's very important that there's people out there discussing and having conversations about basic income and trying to get governments to take it on seriously and get it enacted as soon as possible.
Thanks, Patrick. That is really helpful in terms of you picking up on the issue around social interaction and the fact that we are finding new experiences each day as we find new ways to interact through screens, which is something that we never imagined we'd have to do. I wonder if you could outline some of the key ways that you think a universal basic income might help during this crisis. What are the things that are going to, if we had a UBI, what would be better and what would be different?
Mm-hmm. So I guess the key thing is that a basic income, can be designed in many different ways, but at the crux of it here is getting money directly into people's pockets, into their bank accounts somehow, and that will allow them to continue buying the essentials, to continue doing those economic interactions that they need to do in order to, frankly, survive. And we are talking about a scenario here where there is a lot of people who have been left behind who don't have an income, and with their health, their mental health and their physical health could severely deteriorate as a consequence of that. So I think in terms of looking at a basic income both now and potentially for the future in a response to this crisis, there are three main things that it does. So first off, it provides economic security for everyone during this unprecedented crisis. It provides everyone with that income floor, that basic level of security that's really important. Second, it helps the economy and subsequently society recover more quickly from the impact of this crisis. If we want to stop a very serious recession when we finally do come out of lockdown and we start to get back to those normal interactions, we still need some sort of stimulus package to help businesses recover, to help stimulate the economy, and a basic income can help with that in terms of encouraging spending and so on. And third, and this is a really important point, I think has been underlined throughout all of this, is that a basic income can protect us from any future crises. the weaknesses of our current system have been dramatically highlighted, just how quickly things have broken down in the wake of this pandemic. And instituting a permanent basic income now will guard us against any future crises, whether they be natural disasters, whether they be conflicts, whether they be viral pandemics. And there's already people talking about potentially a second wave of this in the future. We need to start building these protections, these social and economic protections into our system, and the basic income is the only proper universal way to do that. And one final point as well, which Lucy touched on earlier, and this is something that a lot of people are talking about now, is mental health and well-being. And I think we can't ignore that there is pretty much conclusive proof out there from basically all of the basic income trials that have happened across the world, that basic income in whatever form has a positive impact on mental health and well-being. And there is going to be a huge adverse impact on people's mental health as a result of this crisis, of having to stay indoors, of stress and anxiety and worry about the virus, of not being able to see your loved ones. And I think by instituting a basic income now, we're not going to solve all of those problems, but we can skim off the number of people that are affected, particularly in terms of economic stress and anxiety. So I think that's the least we can do, is to give people peace of mind around that.
That's really helpful. I noticed that you were talking about exposing the weaknesses, and I guess some might counter that by saying, well, the government has responded quite quickly and is bringing in support measures and rescue packages, etc. What do you think UBI would achieve that the current government funding package for recovery is not going to achieve?
Well, look, I mean, the current government schemes are certainly to be welcomed. Better than nothing, right? But they still bring the same problems of so many other support schemes. They are still largely means tested, they still have exclusions, and they still create inevitable losers. And particularly, I want to talk about the self-employed here. So many self-employed people are incredibly scared about their future over the coming weeks and months because they have been completely ignored by the government's current plans, the wage relief plan and so on. They've basically been told just to sign on for universal credit, £94 a week. It's paltry for anyone, but someone who's completely just lost a business, they have put their blood, sweat and tears into growing over a number of years, to say sign on for your 94 quid a week is frankly insulting. But another thing in terms of actually administering these schemes, there was 42,000 people in the queue to get verified for universal credit yesterday. I know because my sister was one of them. I know because I have tens of constituents, as a local councillor, tens of constituents who are emailing me on the hour asking me how they can get their universal credit claim through, and will they have to wait days or weeks to get it. And the fact is that the DFC in Northern Ireland, and this is probably the same across the water, simply can't cope with the demand and the need for these services right now. It's not just an unprecedented rise in the amount of people applying, but on the back end of their service, they've got workers who are being sent home to work from home. They have workers who are off sick. They have workers who don't want to, and rightly so, don't want to come into work because proper social distancing guidelines can't be adhered to in modern offices. So we have a huge problem there in terms of public services' ability to actually administer these schemes, aside from the fact that the administration of many of them will create extra costs for the taxpayer in terms of setting them up and putting out guidance and deciding, which businesses have furloughed workers and when did those people sign on and when did they get furloughed, and all of this work that has to be done to actually get the money out to people. Why can we not just administer a very simple system? A basic income could be paid through PAYE, it could be paid through HMRC, it could be paid through DFC and DWP and all of those nice abbreviations abbreviations. But for those who aren't signed on to the system, who maybe don't have a bank account, we can still look at ways of giving them cashable checks or prepaid debit cards through post offices or other essential services. It is a much simpler system to administer and actually could present potential cost savings as well as getting every single person covered. There's also the fact that the government are prioritising businesses here in terms of rates relief and grants and the wage relief scheme. But frankly, it's the bigger businesses that are going to be more able to survive here. And the bigger businesses with the more valuable rateable properties, they're the ones that are going to be kept afloat. It's the smaller businesses who maybe don't have the rateable properties and can't get the grants that are going to be worse off, who have less cash flow, who are going to go underground more quickly. Again, a basic income helps those individuals as well. So I think the main thing as well is all of this time put into administering these schemes is wasting government resources that could be spent elsewhere in diverting workers onto the frontline services, you know, into the NHS, in ensuring that the lockdown procedures are working properly. Speed is of the essence here in all sectors to deal with this crisis, and the economy is collapsing. People need cash now, and only a universal basic income can do that.
That's really fascinating, Patrick. I think one of the things that struck me when I first started hearing about basic income was that we already in this country have one for everyone who has children with child benefit, and it's not one that causes lots of agony over the fact that everybody gets it, from the richest to the poorest. It's there and it's easy to administer, and as you say, you know, we've seen so much administration in these last few days around the scramble for universal credit and all the other support packages for different parts of the economy. And yet imagine what it would have been like if we all had a universal basic income and then could be more positive in a way and redeploy into some of the things that do need to happen and need to happen quite quickly. So no, that's really, really helpful. Patrick, you've studied this for a long time and it's the subject of your doctorate. You know, this might sound like an outlandish idea to some folk who are watching, but Lucy mentioned that it's been tried in lots of different places before and that there are trials going on at the moment. Can you give us a bit of a quick overview of where this has been tried before and what people have made of it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll put up a slide on all of the different countries that it's been trialed in, and some of the most interesting data has come out of places like Canada, Barcelona, Finland. There's a couple of really good experiments in California right now. There's a really big experiment going on in Kenya that's doing some really exciting stuff, and there's been ones in India and Namibia as well. Scotland's working on one too. But I want to talk about some of, because this has been such a fast moving situation over the last week, that I want to talk about some of the ideas that are being floated, particularly across the water in the US, where the US Treasury is really seriously looking at giving $1,000 to all working age adults and $500 to children. My understanding is that would last for a few months. Mitt Romney has proposed $1,000 for everybody, but only for 1 month. Across the aisle, some of the Democratic senators, free Democratic senators in the Senate, Booker, Brown, and Bennett, I believe, have proposed $2,000 quarterly to everyone, which would be phased out above certain income levels. So not everyone would get it. Everyone, I think, under 90K would get that one. Bernie Sanders has proposed $2,000 for everyone that wouldn't be phased out, that would be for everyone and would continue. And there's been similar proposals in the House of Representatives on that as well. So there's a lot of different proposals and different bills floating about in America right now. So I think that's really one to watch in terms of how the conversation around actually enacting this policy should be framed. But closer to home, the UBI lab in Sheffield, who have done a fantastic job, and I'll give them a shout out. I'm very proud that I went to Sheffield University and got to meet some of these guys when I studied there. They are doing fantastic work in terms of game planning what a UBI emergency bill would look like in England. So they have proposed £500 per adult and £200 per child, running alongside the job retention scheme, the wage relief scheme. Once that ends, and that's scheduled to last for 3 months, once that ends, for 2 months after that, it would be £1,000 per person and 500 per children. They've estimated that that would cost in total 170 billion over the 5 months, which may be a substantial fee, but if we consider that 140 billion was given to bail out the banks in 2008, and very few people on the ground, ordinary citizens, actually saw a penny of benefit as a result of that, whereas this scheme would directly put money into people's pockets and help them through this crisis, I don't think it's a significant amount to cough up. And also the government are proposing to spend on unprecedented levels during this crisis. So it's not necessarily how you pay for it, it's the political will of being willing to think outside the box and do new and important things, which I think is key here, rather than actually how, because I think all governments are committed to the fact that they need to cough up the money to get through this crisis, or there is going to be an unprecedented economic breakdown. So I don't think those figures are outlandish. But I think as well that this emergency grant, for all of us within the basic income community, needs to be designed so that it will prove the ability of basic income to provide stability for all. I think it will do that automatically, but I think we need to be looking long term as to how that basic income could be potentially tweaked, increased or reduced depending on the model you're looking at, and maintained as a universal basic income going forward, both to re-stimulate the economy and to protect us against any future crises. And also, I think it's a key point that if we can get a basic income now as an emergency, we're building that infrastructure for how a basic income would work beyond that. We're setting up those systems, those payment systems. We're identifying where people are to get them their checks or their payments. So I think it's really important that if we can get this going now as an emergency, we have a really clear blueprint for how a basic income could work going forward.
Thanks, Patrick. That's encouraging, and it's really exciting to hear of how it's gone up the political agenda around the world, and all the preparatory work that folk like the UBI Lab and others around the world who have championed this idea are starting to see some fruit for their work, and it's just really an exciting time to be involved. I just wondered if you had anything to say in conclusion. I know that you're going to talk to us about how we can make it happen, and that's really important. But are there any other things that you want to say? Do you want to say anything about the situation here in Northern Ireland?
Just from the level of being a counsellor in my community, I have seen that individual people are the front line of defense, and we don't have all of the answers either. The communication is coming thick and fast and changing by the hour. I'm doing my best to answer, hundreds of messages and emails and phone calls a day in terms of keeping people updated and trying to compile that information somewhere. And an awful lot of those questions are around people's economic situation. And because it is so fragile, because of the system we have and how fragile it is to shocks like this, so many people are experiencing that anxiety. And my heart in particular goes out to people who are self-employed and have built a business. I'm one of those people. I have also built a business that could face closure if this continues. I completely understand what the situation that they're in, and we need to do more to support them. And I can't think of a better way of supporting everybody than a basic income.
Super, good. Do you want to talk to us now as we close? In terms of what are the things that we can do individually and as Basic Income Northern Ireland, and we always welcome more people to join our group. But what are the key things that we can do to push forward and to make this happen?
Yeah, so I think individually, the main thing that people can do is start a conversation around basic income. You know, take what Lucy has said in terms of what the idea is about. Go away and look into it more, research a bit more on it. Go to the Basic Income Earth Network website, where they've got some really good information to educate yourself on what a basic income is and its history and so on. Go and bring that conversation to a friend or family member. You know, there's a lot of people have a lot of time in the house to chat and get to know each other better and discuss interesting and radical ideas at the moment. Make the most of that time to have a discussion about economic security, about how we can best build an economic system that provides for everyone and protects everyone, especially in the face of crises like this. We're going to put up a slide as well, which is going to have a link to a couple of petitions that you can sign to get involved. There's been a petition to the UK Parliament that has reached 100,000 signatures and will be debated in the House of Commons now, which is fantastic. One of the main challenges that we've always struggled with as a group is awareness of basic income as an idea, and we're doing all we can to try and change that. But you know, talk to anyone you know, talk to anyone in the community and voluntary sector about how this might help them. Talk to your local councillor, send off an email to your MLA or your MP, put it on their agenda, get them to do the research and read into this. I mean, one of the most exciting things that I've seen is right across the board, from the Greens to the DUP to Sinn Féin, all jumping on basic income as an idea, which is fantastic to see. But we need to keep that momentum going. We need to make sure these politicians are not just paying lip service to the idea, that they're actually understanding of it and invested in it and committed to building a fairer system now and in the future.
Thanks, Patrick. That's given us lots of ideas of things that we can do, maybe one thing a day during this period of staying home, and making an effort to share the idea with others. I think it's a really important point that you make about focusing on the contacting your politicians and asking them to think about it more, so that beyond this crisis we see more politicians aware of it, and we have more people asking for this kind of change. You said that we're looking for a change to an economic system that provides and protects, and Lucy said this is the kind of system that boosts new ideas and makes new things happen. So thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us, and here are our asks.
I'll read through them, will I? So guys, yeah, if you can have a look at our asks here, as Patrick mentioned, there's a number of petitions that you can sign, but also like reach out to your local representatives and kind of, you know, encourage them to consider this and to look at this and to put it forward. And the last one, like Patrick said, start a conversation about UBI with your people, whoever your people may be. That can be online, it can be offline. In my experience, I mean, I was introduced to UBI, I think about 5 years ago now, and it's one of those really interesting topics when you get into conversations with people about it. People who I expect would be interested and all over it are not always, and then people who you think might not be for it can actually bring ideas to it, and it's a fascinating topic to talk to people about. I find it very interesting. My dad said to me the other day, he was like, "Oh, I see that UBI thing that you've been not talking about / banging on about for the last few years is getting a lot of traction now." But it's something that people are hearing about. So definitely, like, just talk to people, discuss it, and you know, it could revolutionize how we live. So yeah, let's do it. These are our social media things. We've got a Facebook, we've got a Twitter. All of these links are up on the Facebook page. If you want to reach out to us, Basic Income NI Group at gmail.com. And we have a meeting every month. We will be reconvening that online, I guess, in the next few months. But we would love to have new members, so please come along and join us. And yeah, let us move forward in Northern Ireland with UBI. Great.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Thank you, everyone. Bye.